So I looked at the Mavericks
Mm-hmm.
and what they were able to do, putting that team together kind of twice this year, like in the offseason and during the season, and where they ended up in the conference finals. I look at Minnesota and what they were able to do a couple years ago with Rudy Gobert going to get Mike Conley. I look at Indiana and what they were able to do going out and getting Pascal Siakam. And it makes it very clear to me about the Sacramento Kings and where they should be doing. And simply, scared money don't make no money. You got to go out there and make some moves, money. You got to make some moves. And it can't be, oh, I don't like how this sets us up for the future. Um, money gonna be tied up now. Money may not be his call, right? Like you may have to go pay grade higher and say, hey,
Mm-hmm.
are you willing to pay this luxury tax or something
Mm-hmm.
like that? But I would say the same thing about Vivek. You know what I mean? My
Mm-hmm.
boy Uncle V. Like scared money don't make no money, and you've got to take the all those teams took a chance. They took a chance, and I'm it's an unforgiving business
Mm-hmm.
where if Dallas got bounced in the first round, or hell, if Rudy Gobert and them flamed out again and all this other stuff, people would be calling for those general managers' jobs and saying that they ruined everything. And look at the bad situation they got them in. I think I saw Dallas didn't have complete control of their picks from like 26 to 30 year
Mm-hmm.
2026 to 2030. They got
Who's this that don't?
Dallas.
Okay.
They got like pick swap, the worst hand of the pick swap, or they traded the first round pick or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But nobody cares about that today because they in the Western Conference Finals.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to look at me saying this and a situation where it's like, say Monty goes out and takes a swing, and he gives up all the picks, and they're in bad financial shape and all this other stuff, and it doesn't work. Like they get bounced in the first round or they don't even make the playoffs. I personally, I wouldn't fire him. I wouldn't be like you're on the hot seat or anything like that because I asked you to take a swing. I saw you play it safe. Now I'm asking you to take a swing. You did. At that point, it's out of your control whether or not it works like that. Not how things work. People lose their jobs. GMs get fired for things that I understand that. I know it's not a perfect world. But hey, man, you got to try it. You got to try it. I also understand last summer and in the middle of this season, not taking a swing. I get it. I get it. Like I get trying to see what this group could do again the next season. But the next season is come and gone. And there's got to be a swing that you take this. And like I've been saying for a while, it's probably going to be somebody with some type of warts. But you got to take
So
a swing, man.
okay, let me play the other side of this. You take a swing.
Mm.
Sometimes you get a hit. Sometimes you miss. A hit. Siakam in Indiana got a hit. Is it a home run? We're not going to know that for a little bit, but certainly a good pickup for them.
Mhm.
A miss could be a trade that didn't work out,
Mhm.
a signing that didn't work out, something along those lines. But is it a swing and a miss is also a trade you tried to execute that you couldn't? Is that fair? Because
I hear what you're saying. I wouldn't consider
I
that
know
a
you know
swing
where
and a
I'm
miss.
going with
Yeah.
this, because I don't think Monty's sitting on his hands. We know for a fact he tried to get OG Anunoby.
Mhm.
We know for a fact he tried to get Pascal Siakam.
Mhm.
For whatever reason, he wasn't able to close on either of those deals. I don't think it's super difficult to figure out why he wasn't able to close on those deals. And at least in the case of those two players, I don't know that I have a major issue with it. I'd like to learn a little bit more about how it went from everybody meeting in Sacramento about Pascal Siakam to all of a sudden trade talks are off with the Sacramento Kings. I'd like to know a little bit more about that because it seemed to it seemed to escalate rather quickly. But players with warts, so to speak, and sometimes the warts you're referring to is availability, a la Zach LaVine, or contract status, a la Brandon Ingram. The price to acquire, like we in our head, and we did this with Brandon Ingram like a week or two ago, we can convince ourselves, well, the price has to be lower because he only has 1 year left on his deal. That's what we felt about Siakam. Indiana didn't feel that way. Indiana not only said, we'll give you what 3 picks, you got it. Also behind the scenes, you got cap money, dog. We see you and Tyrese as the 1-2 punch for this organization for a long time. We got you. Would you rather go to Indiana or would you rather go to Sacramento? And in that situation, the player has a lot to say. I don't think Monty is doing nothing. I just don't think that player, for him to now, maybe because of the way this season went, the 3 players, 3 draft picks, hey, if he's going to leave, he's going to leave. We have to do it because we have to make the play. Not only do we have to make the playoffs this year, we've got to make a run in the playoffs. Maybe that's different now. Maybe his line of thinking is different now than it was in the middle of the season. Or we believe, in the case of OG Anunoby, the way that it was at the beginning of the season. Maybe he is more apt to take not just a risk, but like a major, major risk to get this team into the position that the 4 remaining teams are in right now next year.
And you're right. And I look at a situation. I'm gonna remove names. I'm not gonna greenie this situation. I'm gonna remove names completely. And I think you heard the same thing. But this is kind of what I'm talking about. There is a scenario that was out there where there was a player that maybe, was available. And one group of people was like, nah, I ain't really sure about that. I don't know. And another group was like, yo, do it. And I'm not really sure. Right now, I don't want I'm not really sure. Go do it. You got it. I understand why you were like, I don't know, man. I understand. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm not saying you're like out of pocket for feeling it. I get it all. But yeah, I think you should go do it. Because I'm sure everybody in those other situations weren't 100% like Minnesota people. Not everybody in Minnesota was probably like, yeah, let's go get Gobert. There's probably some people that are like, I don't know about this, bro. Like, there's probably still today, even though they won, people like, you see when we started to come back, you see who was out there on the floor. Like, I don't know. Like, to this day, there's probably people who aren't sold on having him there. But I think now Monty's at that point where, yeah, you gotta take that chance.
I mean, you have to take that chance too, because this team's not going to really, this team's not going to get to the heights that you want it to, I think.
So,
and I know I kind of threw it out there.
But it could, like, so the flip side, we're seeing the good right now. We're seeing the Minnesota Timberwolves. Dallas went and got Kyrie Irving. We're seeing
that was a controversial move too.
Absolutely. Like, I questioned New York getting Jalen when they were in on the Donovan thing. They went out and got OG Anunoby as well. Like, there's, you look around and you see everyone that made that move. And look, we're focusing on the teams that all worked out for. Let's use Brandon Ingram as an example. Hey, we got to throw caution to the wind here and go get Brandon Ingram. Dope. The other side to all of this is it doesn't work. The other side of this, it's hard to envision a scenario where they missed the playoffs with this trio. But things could happen. Domas could get hurt. De'Aaron could get hurt. Ingram could get hurt. They could all play 82 games and it doesn't work. Again, hard to envision, but there's a scenario where that happens. There's a scenario where the Kings do acquire a Brandon Ingram type player, and they're in the position that the Minnesota Timberwolves are in, that the Dallas Mavericks are in. They're in the Western Conference Finals. You could take it a step further and get them to the NBA Finals, but they lose. And then Ingram just goes and plays somewhere else. And so you lost Ingram. You got to the finals. You didn't win because it changes when you win. Then you're Toronto. Then you're like, whatever. Got it. Keep it moving. But then you're not even back to where you were. You're way worse because you don't have the players anymore. And whether you like those specific players or not, at least one of them plays 82 games for you. The other one can be impactful. You don't have some form of draft picks in this conversation either. And you're left to rebuild with your trade chips gone and the guy you acquired just leaving in free agency. So there's another side to all of this. Rudy's a little bit different because Rudy had like 15 years on his contract. Like Utah like signed him and traded him essentially. Like there's no the big worry was if it was really tracking to not working, you probably weren't going to be able to trade him. It was going to be really, really difficult with the lineup that you had coming from the lineup that he had in Utah and a team going, yeah, that's what we need. That would have been really difficult. But him having those years on his contract was it's a weird term, comforting for Minnesota. Like, yo, we've got time to make this work. Let them talk. Let the Tim Bontemps write what they want to write. Let the little podcasters talk about whatever they want to talk about. We've got one of the young stars of the league. We've got some really good players here. We're bringing in the ultimate professional and the ultimate veteran. We've got time to make this thing work. An Ingram type player, you don't have that time. You've got 1 year, and you still have to hope. But we're not seeing that here. That's not part of the story with Indiana. It's not part of the story with Dallas. It's not part of the story with Minnesota. But the other side of the story is it doesn't work.
And for me personally, because I just the type of person I am, I always try to go into things looking at the worst case scenario. And that's how I try to evaluate stuff. Like worst case scenario, if worst case scenario happens, would I still be, can I live with myself making this decision or making this transaction or whatever the case may be? And Gilbert M. in the Matthews Mattress Chatty House says, what about situations like the Suns or the Nets? I can live with it. I can live with it. Maybe not everybody feels that way, but
I assume he's referring to the Harden Durant.
Yeah. Where they went for it, didn't work, didn't get really anything out of it, and that was the end. I can live with that. Not everybody can, right? But I can live with going for it. I can live with going for it. Like I'm okay. Just because you go, I understand. Just because you go for it doesn't mean it's going to work. I'm thinking more of the mindset and the process, not necessarily the results. The results, because the results, anything could happen. The results won't necessarily dictate whether, and on top of that, you don't know the results when you make the decision, right? So I can't base it on the results because I don't even know what they are. I got to base it on where the team is, where the league is, and am I willing to live with the good and bad of this situation? And absolutely I am.
What does it look like on the other side though if you don't take that chance? Like if Monty, not necessarily waiting, but a deal just doesn't get done, I feel like it's better for them to take a risk at this point rather than just sit with what they have now.
So, you know, your boy, both your boys, he had a good point. He had a good point. Bill Simmons had a really good point.
You talk to him this time.
No, I can't. Chatty House, he's your problem. I can't do anything.
He had a good point about Dallas and Oklahoma City, and for like half of the podcast, he was just really like not beside himself. That's a little aggressive, but he was like, I can't believe OKC didn't make a deal at the trade deadline, and he was like, I understand, like, hey, you got a bright future. You get these young guys in there, you see how they are, and then maybe you make decisions after that. but he talks about basically the Daniel Gafford deal from Dallas to acquire him from Washington. And they used, I forgot what the deal was with Dallas, but they used, I think, their own pick or a play. Maybe it was Rashawn Holmes, because I think he went to Dallas or he went to Washington.
He went to Washington. Yeah.
I think it was Rashawn Holmes and a first-round pick that they got from Oklahoma City to go get Daniel Gafford. And who knows if they knew about it or what, but he's like, OKC just kind of sat there and let it happen. He's like, think about it like this. If
the Mavs send Rashawn Holmes and a 2024 pick via Oklahoma City to the Wizards for Gafford.
So if you're his point, I thought was a good one, was if you're OKC, you have more than enough assets to trump that deal. And you could get Daniel Gafford. And thinking about this series right now, if OKC has Daniel Gafford, as opposed to going up against Dallas, I think it swings the series. And you got an opportunity to go to the finals, to win a championship this year. Like but okay.
That's such. So when did your boy?
That's your,
literally the only person here who heard this.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever referenced Bill Simmons on here once.
Ever.
What?
As far as like, hey, I was listening to Bill Simmons the other day, and hey, he said something pretty neat.
Was that today?
What? Yeah, yesterday, last night.
So that's hindsight. That's revisionist history.
Well, yes and no, because he has said, I've heard other people say, or other times as well, that OKC was a little too small. So, like, throughout the season, like they needed, a bigger center or somebody to go with Chet and all this. Like
they were the number 1 seed in the Western Conference, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you think they shouldn't have made a move?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying particularly talking about a player like Daniel Gafford. Now, if you're Oklahoma City, you're Sam Presti, you don't know exactly what you have right now. You don't. And as stupid as all of this is, everyone to a T says, well, they're a little ahead of their timeline. I don't know where these timelines are published. I don't know if they're handed out in league offices. I don't know how you find out the timelines of teams, but we do know how young Oklahoma City is, and we do know that they are, quote, ahead of where everyone thought they would be. Fantastic. You don't know what you have yet. At that time, if you're Sam Presti, at the time of the trade deadline, you're midway through the season, you're 1, 2, or 3 in the Western Conference, separated by probably a game to a half a game to a game. And that's it. I don't really have an issue with them playing the season out, trying to figure out what it is that they have. Now, if you sit on your hands this offseason and you've determined, it was a guy like it, we were too small. We were too small in the playoffs. Like, we can't be that small in the playoffs. If that's your determination, then you've got to go do something. And then if you want to be upset that they sat on their hands this offseason, should they do that? Yeah, I get that. But the day after they get eliminated from the playoffs to go, wow, if they had just gone and got Daniel Gafford, okay, stop.
I mean, yes and no, but that number one, it doesn't. He's right. He's right about that. Number two,
it's easy to be right about it the day after they get eliminated. It's easy to be right about it 6 games into a series, at the end of a 6-game series.
That's right. But to be fair to the situation, and not just him, there are a lot of people who are like, if they make a move, they could catapult. Yeah, they're the one right now. But what was the whole thing about the Thunder? They kind of did the same Kings thing with them, right? Like, yeah, they're the 1 seed, but the Lakers want to play them.
Yeah,
like they're young. They're
the mark.
We said that in Sacramento. Like, we'd love to play OKC.
That's because they were a good matchup with them.
Well,
it wasn't shade. It was just
it's not shade, but it was.
I would have played Denver too.
Oh, that's true too.
I mean,
it's the same preference though, right? Like, they were young. People would say because they're young. Like, there was still.
But I wouldn't. I'd say it was a good matchup. I didn't say. I never said as it pertains to Sacramento.
I'm not saying you particularly. I'm just saying I've heard those conversations about, like, get them without playoff experience and all this other stuff. And like, the whole point of, like, it's easy to say after the day after they got eliminated. People were saying this before the trade deadline. And Sam Presti, to your point, you laid out why he said no before. I understand it, but
no, I'm guessing.
But it's probably a good guess. But it's not like they're just saying this the day after they got eliminated. This was a conversation that was had when they were the 1 seed or the 2 seed and looking like, all right, trade deadline, you got all these assets, you got an opportunity to improve here and like really add to this roster. And they decided not to. Here's another thing that I ask, and I'm really asking because I'm doing it on the fly. When's the last time a team didn't make a move and then they won? They're like, oh yeah, they didn't make a move and they stand pat. They stand pat and it all worked out.
Well, how long are you talking?
We just recent memory.
Well, no, but what I mean is like with Denver, like is it the Aaron Gordon move? Like how many years are you talking about before
Aaron Gordon? Yeah, you don't have
like
to win.
Because
you
you're
don't
looking
have to
at
win that year.
You're
right?
looking at Porzingis as potentially being
Right.
the turning point for Boston, Rudy Gobert being the turning
Right.
point for Minnesota,
and you don't have to win
Kyrie
the year
in
after
Dallas.
you make that. Just in the immediate
so
era. Like
I don't know. I don't know the answer to your question. Because just off the top of my head, I mean it might be Golden State. I don't know.
Might be they kind of
because like Toronto made a very very important move to win an NBA championship.
Yeah, and when I think about Golden State, they're close to that. Like I think they kind of did make a move, but they also kind of got Andrew Wiggins too. I think the year before, or was it? I don't think it was the same year.
Was that the
year
D'Lo
before.
deal?
Yeah.
Well, what about their first
that was
ring,
the-
though?
So yeah, that's going all the way back to 16. No, that's going all the way back to 15.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be
I mean,
perfect. The point is usually
you
you gotta leap on faith a little bit.
So but is that Domas?
No,
it's not.
I mean, Domas is a big deal. Don't get it twisted. That was,
but that's to set the foundation. You're looking for
and that's the other reason. I'm glad you brought that up. That's the other reason why I think Monty can, for me, maybe not everybody thinks this way. Most importantly, maybe his boss doesn't think this way. But for me, you've made a number of good deals since you've been here. A number of good you went and got Domas in that work. You drafted Keegan Murray in that work. You signed Malik Monk in that work. You went and found a guy like Keon Ellis, and he's looking like a fringe 2-guard starter. The Herter trade was a good deal. Like you built up equity, in my opinion, to go take a swing now. And if it doesn't work, your job shouldn't be in jeopardy. That's the way I think about it.